A very good morning to you. It is the start of a new week. We're on week 6 already of Series 3 of the Public Relations podcast and newsletter. I have just got back from Iceland. If you've not been to Iceland, it is a very cold country in the Northern Hemisphere, a long way up. It is pretty cold, but I've been picking up some PR tips there on my short trip. I'm going to share with you today how a cafe used a distinctly Icelandic approach to getting noticed. Also, how some hot natural water springs managed to turn themselves into a global brand. I've been asking people there about how that was actually done, and it's quite interesting. I'll give you the details in a second. Plus, this week, part 2 of our series on making a documentary about your organisation on zero budget with zero time. And we've got the usual diary dates, one of which is a gift for PR people this week and for marketers. I mentioned last time that I was going to do the influencer tutorial. That's on hold for a little bit because there's a bit more prep work to do. And if you're joining us for the first time, this is the Public Relations podcast and newsletter. You will find the overview in this podcast, and then you will get the detail in the newsletter at thepublicrelationspodcast.com. But let's start with a question. Should you trust the public? There was a fascinating article I spotted in The Economist, which is a weekly news magazine this week. The article was about the growth of the fast fashion platform called Shein, which is a Chinese website which is starting to spread around the world really rapidly. And the people who use this most are Gen Zers. Now, the weird thing about this is that if you look at the data, you wouldn't think that they would be interested in this. And the reason is because Gen Zers, whenever they're surveyed, tend to say that the environment is a really important factor for them. And yet, if you take the narrative about fast fashion to be true, environmental credentials are not something that generally the fast fashion industry has. So what is going on here? Because if we trusted the surveys, if we trusted the data from a marketing perspective here, we would never have set up a fast fashion company, right? Because Gen Zers don't relate to that. So should we give up listening to people's opinions at all then, if they don't reflect their actions? Well, no. And here's the problem. If the product is good, word of mouth will get around. People will buy that. You know, look at Amazon, which has at times a very mixed public perception, or some of the budget airlines out there where the owners openly mock the public, yet people still use the services because the product meets their needs so well. But if we're the brand creator, if we're doing the role of a PR or a marketer within our organization, then we're operating not in the product space, partly we are, but we're mainly operating in the emotional space. So this is where people say what they claim to believe and feel that way in that moment, even if when they get their money out of their wallet, they do something different. So we don't just need to have an amazing product or experience that people talk about with their friends. We also need to appeal to their emotions. So our product and brand voice may in fact be completely out of alignment, but we need to do both. Now, is that good or bad? Well, look at the data of what people say and do. It seems that people themselves can't decide either. Still to come today, part 2 of our series on making a documentary for zero budget. But first, let me talk about some of those things that I spotted in Iceland over the past couple of days. And I want to start off by talking about cafes. I went to quite a unique one while I was there. You know, we've got cat cafes now, haven't we, where you can go and stroke cats. And we've got pottery cafes, and there's even robot cafes now, where you get served by a robot. But I finally went to one last weekend in a cow shed. The cafe was built into a section of a barn on a farm, and only a thin pane of glass was separating you from the cows, one of which was enthusiastically licking the glass, by the way. Now, there are thousands of cafes out there, and I suspect whatever organization you're involved in, there are other people doing a similar thing to what you're doing as well. You know, as we know on this podcast, just being good at what you do is no longer good enough. You've got to have something which makes you stand out. Claiming you're the best doesn't hold any credibility anymore because everyone says they're the best. So we need to be unique. You know, when people start searching for what you're doing, they often go onto a search engine and look at the options out there. And if everyone's saying they're the best, then you've got to have something which makes you stand out, that makes you jump off the page. It doesn't necessarily mean, of course, building a cafe in a cow shed, but you do need to be different. So next time you're putting out some content or some marketing, or you're thinking about the brand story around your organization, just think about that cowshed cafe. If you check out the newsletter this week as well, I've actually got a video in there of me inside the cafe in Iceland. So if you want to see what that looks like and how they did it, You can see that there. It's a very short little video, and you can sign up to the newsletter at thepublicrelationspodcast.com. Now, the other thing that caught my eye in Iceland was how a hot spring, so this is where hot thermal water, volcanic water coming up through the ground, and people go and swim in the water, which literally bubbles out into the landscape. How did somewhere like that turn from being a natural blip into a worldwide phenomena? The place is called the Blue Lagoon, if you've not heard of it before, and it is a thermal spa where the celebrities all go. If you're going to Iceland, people always go to the Blue Lagoon. Well, why was it that a place like this had become so well known around the world? It really got me wondering. So, as usual, I couldn't help but starting to dig into it and start talking to people to try and find out what the story was behind it. One local told me that the Blue Lagoon, as it's now called, started like every other thermal pool in Iceland. There's lots of them. I wish we had that in the UK, and I'm sure you do where you are. It comes out at a really nice 38 degrees. It's really, really pleasant. And he told me how you used to drive along this dirt road, which was alongside a power station, a geothermal power station powered off the hot water coming out of the ground. And then you would literally park your car on the side of the road, and then you would just climb into this pool. But then in 1992, the land, having been sold off, was sealed off, and a spa was established on the site. The waters are very rich in silica. They're very cloudy. And silica is said to be really good for your skin. So it was marketed as a health spa, particularly for skin conditions. But then it gradually turned into this upmarket tourist attraction. We've talked about experiential marketing before, the importance of having a consistent brand throughout. And when I run through these points now, you will see exactly what I mean, because the team behind it, the marketing team and the PR team behind it, clearly know what they're doing. The first thing is the whole design of the place. It's a mix of a sort of 4-star international hotel and a swimming bath, which might sound slightly odd, but for example, in the changing rooms, the mirrors and the lighting and the high-tech lockers all send this message of a unique experience. There's no weird smells around the place. It feels like a hotel. The staff, even the people handing out the towels, are more like sort of concierge at a hotel than swimming pool staff. That doesn't happen by accident. That's by design, you can tell. The technology in the place as well feels high-tech, certainly not tacky. You know, there's a wristband collector when you leave at the exit that has this slow but strangely satisfying metal door which closes slowly over the top of the band that you have around your wrist that you use to pay with things as you exit. The price also, it certainly wasn't expensive, particularly considering Iceland, which is a very expensive place. It was about $63. It was about 50 British pounds. It's certainly a lot cheaper than the spa that I'm going to in 2 weeks' time, where the normal door price for that one is $240, 190 British pounds. But it still indicated that it was a higher end experience than the other spas around Iceland, which are much, much cheaper. The website is also slick, feels a bit like a hotel, feels a bit like a spa. The shop at the exit has a design look. It actually feels like you're walking into a sort of high-end fashion shop. They also clearly understand the visitors. You know, Iceland is not a cheap place to visit, and it is cold, as I say, which tends to attract a well-educated, more financially capable visitor, and they deliver the experience that those people want to have. They also know that visitors are unlikely to return often. So what do? They know that word-of-mouth marketing is essential. You are allowed to take photos inside, something that many swimming pools ban, because they want selfies all over social media. If you want to know what this place looks like, it's in the newsletter this week. I've included a couple of pictures, and you can see the incredible blue colours of the place. And finally, the one thing that they can't control, but they got by encapsulating, they found something that was amazing and branded it, was the nature itself. It's that watercolor. You get this white border around it as well, which is the naturally drying silica, and this rocky lava landscape. It all looks alien but beautiful. It's very photogenic. So it's the kind of thing that every Instagrammer on earth and every person posting a picture on social media will be using. The main conclusion I get from this is the team there are brilliant because they understand the whole experience from start to finish. Okay, it is time for part 2 of our mini-series about making a documentary about your organisation with zero budget and time as usual. That's one of the principles of the Public Relations podcast and newsletter. We had a previous episode where we talked about the equipment needed to make this particular documentary, some of the simple stuff that you can get. Have a listen back to the previous episode if you missed that one. But this week we are talking about what to do next. Now you've got the equipment, how to approach it. Step 1. What's the story? you want to tell. And whether you've been asked to make this video by the managing director or it was your own idea, the process is the same. Ask yourself, what is the one thing you'd like to get across? The more messages you get in there, the less chance there is that people are going to remember it when they watch it. Is it about the organization's history? Is it about the cutting edge ideas you have or the enormous experience of the people working within it? Pick one message you want to get across. Step 2, who is on brand in your organization? Think about the people that you've got. Are there people who are really friendly? Are there people who are particularly passionate about what they do? Is it that foreman that you've got working for you who is just such a great talker? Is it that lawyer who is really good or has done celebrity cases? I'm thinking of Johnny Depp case here, but whether you've got a lawyer who's done something like that or not, who is on brand, who lives the brand, who lives the story that you're trying to get across? Make a list of those people. Next, what have they done to demonstrate it? There's an awful lot of videos out there from organizations where people sound enthusiastic, but that doesn't really give a lot of credibility. And sometimes you can tell that they're on the verge of being actors. They've clearly been trained too much. So what is it about these people that gives them credibility? If we're talking about the lawyer, for example, do they have a wall full of professional qualifications? Or is there a plumber in your organization who has done a really tricky problem at a famous building? Once you've identified your story, you've got the people, you've worked out their credibility, approach them. See if they'll be happy to be filmed. Give them a bit of flattery. It never goes amiss. Make the whole process sound really simple as well, and let them know why they are so important to what you are doing. And then once you've identified who you've got, think about what the one point is that you want them to say, right? The reason I say this again is because the more you get them to say, the more people will not take it in when they watch the video. So if you've got that friendly lawyer, what is the one point they can get across? What is the one point that plumber can get across, which will help to tell this story that we talked about in step 1? Finally, once you've made your list, you've approached them, you've spoken to them, and you've worked out the key point you want to get across, arrange your time to chat. Next time in part 3, or at least when we get to part 3, we'll look at how to film all this and what to say next. And if you missed all these points, or you're sat on the train at the moment and you can't write down any notes, don't worry. It's all in the Public Relations Podcast newsletter, thepublicrelationspodcast.com, thepublicrelationspodcast.com. Quick recap of last week. How did that speaking project go? Last week we had 5 days where we did a different part of trying to position yourself for talking at a major event about your organization. And we ran a different part of that tutorial on each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week. I had videos on social media as well. If you had a chance to follow along with that, what sort of progress did you make? I'm still staggered how I got this opportunity to speak at this event in June in front of 1,500 people at a huge stadium in Porto, in Portugal. And it just makes me think, after I talked about some of those examples last week about how people use public speaking to promote their organizations, how if I could do it relatively easily, how could you do it too? If you missed all that, then you need to go back and listen to the previous episode and make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter next time, because there was a lot more details in there. Right, to conclude this week, selfies and picnics. These are our dates for the diary. Looking ahead to the 21st of June, it is National Selfie Day. What a gift for PR people, this one. If you're looking for excuses for people to take photos with your products, then this is a great day to do that. But give them a reason to do it. Don't just say, oh, take a picture with jewelry or our clothes or whatever it is, your product. Give them some kind of theme, such as an interesting way to do it. Or, for example, if they're part of a campaign, then what is the best selfie they took this year, or what's the funniest selfie they took this year, or something like that. But National Selfie Day is a great opportunity to give people permission to share their selfies with you, and perhaps even organize a prize too, or a discount on products if they submit a picture on social media. And June the 18th, a couple of days before that, is International Picnic Day. Now, do you do something related to, well, obviously food, but maybe nature related, or even relationships between people? There could be a hook here, which is all about families or couples getting out, sharing a bit of nature and sharing a bit of time together. There's so many different ways you could tie into International Picnic Day on June the 18th. Don't forget, social media. I'm on That PR Chap at Twitter, That PR Chap Official on Instagram. Oh, and if you are about at some of these locations, Nice in France, between the 19th and 22nd of May. I'm going to be there. Also going to be in Porto in Portugal on the 3rd and 4th of June, speaking at that event, and also in Athens in early July in Greece. I'm also going to be in Melbourne, Australia, late September. So if you are around in any of those places, and as always, there's no agenda needed. Let's just share a coffee and ideas and experiences. I would love to find out what you're doing in your PR, and maybe I can put something in the show too. I hope, as always, you have an absolutely fantastic week. I hope the ideas I've shared with you this week have been useful. ThePublicRelationspodcast.com is the place to sign up to newsletter if you haven't already. In the meantime, I hope you have a very successful week. Let me know how you get on.